television and put on the weather. Then I've trained myself to give up on the past, cause I've frozen time between hearses and caskets. Lost control when I panicked at the acid test. I wanna get better.
Thank you for joining us tonight for Muscatine Viewpoint. I am sitting in for your usual host, Chad Bishop. My name is Naomi DeWinter, and I serve as the president of Muscatine Community College. Joining me for this evening's conversation are two candidates, Charlie Harper, who is running for Muscatine mayor, and Michael Rehwaldt, who is running for another term as a representative of the Second Ward of Muscatine. So we have a series of questions that we'd like to ask of them, and we will begin by inviting them to tell the voters a little bit about their campaigns so far. Michael, I know you are running again, so you have some experience in this position. So let's start by introducing you to our voters and to our viewers tonight.
Thank you. And the question is, how's my campaign being operated? What am I doing in the campaign?
Tell us about your campaign so far.
It's a combination of advertising on KWPC. There'll be some advertising on Voice of America. There'll be some, at least 3 mail pieces, and a lot of walking, and the usual few yard signs. So it's pretty simple.
Can you tell us about the Second Ward? What is contained within that, and how is it unique within Muscatine?
It is unique, as opposed to the other wards, which are generally 99% residential. My ward contains downtown. It contains the library, the city hall, etc. It includes, in addition to regular residential areas, it includes the residential historic district, which is basically up 2nd and 3rd Street. So it is unique in Muscatine, and it has a special flavor. And I was born and raised in the 2nd Ward, so it's home.
Do I recall reading your family has a history of serving on city council?
Indeed.
Your father? Okay.
Indeed.
Yep.
I was urged to run by some friends. And when I started to reflect on it, I remember my father's service, although I was just a tad, and how much he enjoyed it, how serious he was about it, how much time he dedicated to it, and overall it was a wonderful experience for him. And I thought, well, I'll give Dad a tip of the hat and try to do it myself. He was a good example. He served on every volunteer board there was in Muscatine, and I think I have too. And working with the MSCA now on fundraising. So that's why. It's just a desire to be of service and follow in Dad's footsteps.
Let me turn to our other guest for this evening, Charlie Harper. He is running for mayor of Muscatine. Charlie, introduce yourself to the voters. What motivated you to run for mayor of Muscatine?
Well, I've been a life resident of the county. I've served a long time here. Probably one of the oldest mayor candidates we've ever had here. I don't really know for sure, but I was asked by some of the influential people to maybe consider doing it. And after a little bit, thanks. So I'm in a semi-retired status, so I believe I have enough time to do it. And so I've served on the Chamber of Commerce and on Parks and Rec Advisory Board and other different things around. And so I figured, well, I've a little bit of practice, so I don't think this is going to be too tough, and I just want to be an ambassador for Muscatine.
So this would be your first public service position, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what unique set of skills would you be bringing to the position of mayor? You mentioned you were a lifelong resident of the county. I know you're with Harper's Cycling. So talk to us
Only
about,
50 years.
Yeah, talk to us about the unique set of skills that you bring?
Well, I think I communicate fairly well with people. I get along with them, and I think if I hadn't got along with people, I wouldn't have survived 50 years.
So communication, listening
Yes.
to people.
You got to listen to what they want, try and go and do your best to go in and give them what they need, and like I say, just get along, and I just decided I really like to go and see Muscatine keep improving. So we're growing slowly, kind of at a regular rate instead of some big flash, and now they're gone and everything's leaving. I think we've built everything well, so yes.
Okay. You talked about communication, Charlie. What are the top 2 or 3 things you're hearing from Muscatine residents that they would like to see addressed?
I think they like to have a more positive thing about the community, and so has been a little bit of a disgrace, you might say, to the community, and I just like to go and straighten that out. That seems to be one of the top things, and people seem to be happy with the construction we got going on and some of the improvements we got going around town, and just continue on in that track.
Michael, let me ask you the same question. We talked about the uniqueness of the Second Ward. What are you hearing among the residents of the Second Ward, the top 2 or 3 needs that they would like to see addressed?
The people in the historic district are always concerned that it stay the historic district and stay single-family housing, because that's what preserves those houses. And I don't anticipate that changing. I'm hearing a lot about the horrible traffic with the detours due to Mississippi Drive. I hear more about that than anything else, which is understandable. 3rd Street now, which is usually pretty quiet, has 4,900 cars a day. So that's, it's an irritation. There are, throughout my ward, homes that are not some homes that are not well kept, some properties that are not as tidy as they should be, and we'll be addressing that very shortly, I think. There's a lot of rental housing in all wards, especially in mine, I think, because of the downtown area. And we're attending to that also. I can address it later.
Okay. Charlie, you talked about believing you have time to give to this position. You said you're semi-retired. So in your mind, what would a typical day as the mayor of Muscatine look like? What kind of things would you be involved with?
Well, the future's going to have a lot to that answer. Not 100% sure, but I do intend to go and have an open door policy there, and being in the office there at a 5-day regular posted hours, 5 days a week, and talk to anybody coming in and try and communicating on. So I know that some of this stuff, I listen to your concerns and try and send them to the proper place so something gets done about it.
And Michael, as the incumbent, can you tell us what a typical day as a city council member looks like?
Well, I don't get as many calls as you might think.
Okay.
But when I do, it usually entails going out to see something and survey a problem and try to figure out with the people who called what to do next. Sometimes there is no real solution, but you can usually figure out one. If to do it right, there's a lot of homework, especially before budget time when we're given a binder that thick. And I think one could wing it, but that would be a terrible way to do it. And it just takes a lot of homework. And each week I'll dedicate at least 2 hours to just driving around town, just seeing what everything looks like. And because you can drive right past things if you're not really looking. And so at least 2 to 3 hours each week. And you always see something that needs to be attended to. And that's worthwhile for everybody, I think. I hope that adds value.
Let me stick with you, Michael, because I want to ask you about your last couple of years or so on the City Council. What decision or action are you most proud of being involved with or advocating for in that time?
I think the top one has to be the new rental housing ordinances. The ordinances that were on the books at that time, they had no teeth to really grab into a problem. I talked to people in Davenport. They had a very good model ordinance, which we took and working with staff, adapted to Muscatine, and it has teeth in it. We can actually do things. And the landlords have a benefit also, because they can now much easier get rid of bad tenants. And any landlord who wants to check out a potential tenant can call the police department. They'll do a free criminal check for them. I think that'll have the longest lasting effect. And all rental housing will now be inspected on a regular basis. And anytime a tenant wants to call, boom, the inspector goes back again. So there are protections for everybody. And at the end of the day, keeps neighborhoods looking nicer. Tenants are better served. Landlords have more protections. And it seems to be working. On a smaller scale or a more neighborhood scale, Iowa Field had been in play over the last few years. And the neighbors around Iowa Field would like it to remain as it has been, their own personal park, actually. So it took some time, took some work, but that's now has a status that it is permanently in a lockbox, if you will. It can't be changed, and it'll remain as it is. It's just perfect as it is. And another item that was, when I ran the first time, people that didn't know any other topic about city government were mad that the firefighters' boot drive had been quashed. And I mean angry. So I got that changed, gathered up the votes to change that ordinance, and the firefighters are out doing a heck of a job.
That's right. I just saw them at Hy-Vee not too long ago. Yeah.
Collecting for MDA, and sometimes they do it at storefronts and sometimes on corners with some restrictions. And it's been a great success, and the whole town wanted that change, I think. So those are the main three things.
And Charlie, you've probably been observing the actions and decisions, discussions of City Council for many, many years. Is there anything that is lifted up for you, a decision that's been made that you were supportive of or not supportive of, that you'd like to discuss?
No, not too many, actually. I've just mostly been an observer on some of the stuff. There wasn't anything that was really a critical thing that I was highly opposed to or anything. It's been quite some time, but actually was when Ragbri came here the first time, Ragbri 4, and this past year was Ragbri 45, so it's been over 40 years ago. But I did, at one time, went and campaigned to the council there, and I had them change the ordinance because it seems like every river city in Iowa has a park on a river. Well, at that time, why there was no alcoholic beverages in the park, which I think is a fine ordinance. However, there should be exceptions, and so they made it if you have a major event that can be overlooked on that time, and that time only. Just because you're having a big family reunion, that ain't big enough event. So anyway, so that there, and so that's went through, and it's worked quite well.
Okay. You run your campaign on the positive things that are going on in Muscatine. Mm-hmm. Describe to us some of the great things that make Muscatine what it is. Well,
there's a lot of things. It's easy. The biggest thing you can see right now that's going on is watch the new hotel go up, and the other thing is having Mississippi Drive that it seemed like after a while some great streets can just develop more potholes and other stuff, and it's time. It's a little bit tired and needs to be done, and so the Mississippi Drive project, which is one of the biggest street projects I know that's ever went on in Muscatine. when the whole thing is done, like from the bridge to the bypass. That's one of the things going on. And we have another great thing it has. We have a great soccer field that when they played the initial game on here, that was between, I believe, the Chicago team and one from Kansas City. And both of them professional teams says our turf was better than what they had on their home field. So that's a feather in your hat. And I know that they've got several different national awards for how the surface is that. So I think that's a great asset that we have here, and some other stuff.
I saw a picture of you at a ribbon cutting on the bike path that
Righty.
was just completed. Yep.
So I've been associated with recreational trails for the last 30 years. So I've worked on some and on the Hoover Trail, and I knowledgeable about some of the other ones and seen what was developed, even though it's inactive at this time. It was just seems to be a thing called a money issue there that they run out of that. So the purpose of the Hoover Nature Trail at the time was to develop the trail, and then it would be turned over to the various counties, preferably the conservation board. So what it turns now, hindsight comes up a lot. It had been simpler. It was only 130 miles long and going through 5 counties and 13 communities, and that's pretty hard to get all of them working together. So if you were at one end and was going to do volunteer work and it's an hour away to get there, why, it cuts down on the number of volunteers showing up. So, but a lot of good thing is so. Yes, the other thing we're fortunate of that few people know, but we're on a national trail system. This is where 4 national trails come through Muscatine. We have adventure cycling, which this is the northern route, and it comes from basically Stillwater, Minnesota to Muscatine, and goes from Muscatine to Monroeville, Indiana. The adventure cycling has a great river route, may not be the right term for it, but anyways, they go and it starts in Muscatine and goes to Louisiana, goes downriver. And then we have the American Discovery Trail, which is coming across. And then the states have set up there the Mississippi River Trail. So we've got 4 of them coming through town. So we occasionally see long distance travelers. And so that's always interesting to talk to them. So it's a little more interesting because I did ride cross country, so a little bit soft spot for them.
So, Michael, Charlie talked about the new hotel, the improvements to Mississippi Drive, the soccer field, the bike paths. What else would you add that makes Muscatine great? You said you have lived here most of your life?
Well, yes,
Okay.
I left for a period for career purposes,
Okay.
but it was always my intent to come home, and here I am.
Yeah.
One of the things that makes Muscatine unique, I think, is not just that we have headquarters of very good and strong and big companies, but the generosity across the town, both from industry, and you have the advantage of a hometown headquarters, that helps. But I've pitched in on fundraising drives from United Way to now with MSCA. I've held the boot out 8th and Cedar last year, and almost everybody that drove by threw something in. And I would stand outside Hy-Vee, and people you wouldn't think would probably be able to do that were pleased to do it. Usually on the way out they had some change. And it's a very generous society here, and it's made a lot of things possible, and it's just indicative of the goodwill and the friendliness you find here in the Midwest, which is why I was so happy to come home.
So we talked a little bit about housing. I think one of the things you were most proud of was the rental housing ordinance update. I want to ask you about the phenomenon that I've just learned in Muscatine, that many more people work in Muscatine than live in Muscatine.
That's correct.
Do you see the city being able to address that trend in some way?
We will, maybe not completely, but we just completed a housing study, and one of the prime uses of that, this is definitive definitive empirical knowledge that we can take to developers, home builders, et cetera, say, we know there's a need for X quantity of this and Y quantity of that. There's a ready market, come. And that's going to be a wonderful tool to get people to come instead of just stick building houses one at a time. That'll be, in my view, the biggest dividend that we'll have from that housing study. A lot of it confirmed what we've already suspected. And it also gives the council even more impetus to help and support developments for the elderly or low or moderate cost housing. We just did one of those, and we're probably going to be doing 2 more of them. It's necessary. I don't think there's any better neighbor than an elderly housing development. It's quiet, and no teenagers. It's pretty wonderful. So the housing study is going to really pay dividends for us. So instead of just being anecdotal, now it's empirical.
Good. Charlie, I'm going to ask you the same question. What pitch would you make to people who currently live in Muscatine, or who currently work in Muscatine, but don't live in Muscatine? Michael talked about housing, and the housing study showed that we have a shortage of certain types of housing. What other things might you lift up to say this is a great place to work and live?
Well, being a little bit of a senior, I've watched the transition over the years where over 50 years ago we was watching all the people go to the big town to work there because there was big factories there, and so now some of those factories have closed, and we've got more production going on here and need for more help. And so I also think that even though some might disagree that everything's high priced, but I think it's a little less expensive to live in Muscatine than upriver. So I think that's a lot to happen there. So I just, conversation with somebody this last week, they was talking about their daughter was in California, and she had a 1-room apartment and only cost $23-25 a month to be there, and it's 1 room. I think anything's cheaper here in Muscatine. Yeah. Less expensive anyways. Nothing's cheaper, just less expensive.
One other detail, it's not a detail, it's serious. Someone discovered that Trulia, which is a real estate website that ranks communities in different ways, somehow had some horribly bad information that rated Muscatine schools the same as Detroit and Watts, California, which just is not true. And we're in the process now of getting that changed. But if you were thinking about, well, I'm going to be working in Muscatine, do I want to live in Bettendorf or a place that has a school system like Watts and Detroit? And when we get that cleaned up, that will help also. I don't know how long it's been in that directory.
Right.
But we'll be happy to get it fixed.
Yeah. Well, the college works closely with Dr. Reby and all of the faculty and staff at the schools, and we've been impressed with their goals of making sure their graduates are successful, that they're ready for the next step, that we're filling or meeting the requirements for the open positions that all of the large companies and smaller companies here have. So I think you're right. There is some inaccurate information that's just not the truth.
No, it's grossly inaccurate. Yeah. And the educational system, like MCC, you provide modest cost, modest to low cost actually, for credit hours schooling. Students who go here, I think, are probably more likely to stay if they're going after a 2-year program. You have occupational training as well as academic. You have lots of things that get people to stay and to be prepared for the workforce in Muscatine. And that serves a wonderful purpose, and I salute you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're hired.
All right, thank you.
There's a lot of it there, and along what he said is that some of them, they're better prepared to go and take some of the occupational courses here, and they don't end up within a 4-year school with $100,000 in student loans, and don't have as big a load on their back when they graduate. I've got 4 grandchildren that come here, so.
Yeah, well, we know the jobs of today will require some training beyond high school, but not necessarily what we've thought of in traditional terms as a bachelor's degree.
Just talked to a local neighbor there that employs some people, and he said he used to go and get anybody that come in looking for a job, why he'd hire them, but sometimes that didn't work out, so now his job requirement is you do have some college, so he figured they were better trainable people if they'd been there, so.
Okay. So in this morning's paper, I read about the decision that was made in favor of Mayor Broderson's reinstatement, I guess, as mayor. I just want to ask you what that means for the city council, what you think that means for Mayor Broderson from here on out.
Well, it means it's over, which is welcome news, I think, for everyone, and it's done. You'd have to ask Mayor Broderson what it might mean for her. The council's been distracted, and we've been the recipient of more than a little conversation and criticism, some of it accurate. But we're all pleased to see this behind us. Thank God the city had extensive insurance coverage. So the actual out-of-pocket expense is not going to be what some people think it is. Well, a lot of it was covered by our legal insurance, which is a wonderful thing. One thing I didn't mention before that I'm proud of having been part of, and that is for the 7th year, there's been no increase in the tax levy on your city taxes in Muscatine, and that's almost unheard of. And my hat is off to the senior staff who have to every year figure out how to do more with less, and they do it. And they're very creative, and they're very serious about it, and the taxpayers don't want to pay anymore. It's real serious. So we're happy with that. And the orders to the staff this year at budget time will be no tax increase next year either. So.
Good, and you've managed that without having to cut.
I think over the years there have been some cuts.
Yeah.
We had a forester once upon a time. It's encouraged us to invest in capital equipment. Now the trash trucks, the garbage trucks that go around, one person, and the rest of it's boom, automatic. And through attrition, these slots have been eliminated, and that's very helpful. Although we have added in the most important area, which is public safety. We've added 4 firefighters, and there are 3 shifts, and then anyway, that was worthwhile. The ambulance calls in Muscatine are about roughly 400 a month, and that's a lot. And Muscatine standard is that an applicant must have the highest degree of EMT licensing before they can apply for the job. And that's a big hurdle to get over. It usually takes 2 years and a lot of money to get that. So all of our people are well cross-trained, and they really hustle. They really hustle. I've talked to firefighters, and their stated goal is to see who gets to be the first one through the door at a fire. They mean it. We're attacking this, and that kind of spirit and courage is you can't buy. They're good people.
Yep. Good. So the residents are asking for more transparency in government, at all levels, even on the local level, national level, transparency. How would you maintain or improve the transparency?
Well, I think some of it there is communicating with the public. A lot of change in the last few years. We with the more whatever, technical aids. They have the city agenda is posted on the Facebook before every meeting, so you do know what's coming up. And it's like watch and see what surprise they got this week, because if you paid attention to the agenda, you know what's on there. That's one of the things. Another thing we've got there with the other communication, well, on the internet, why they're mostly posting weekly. We have a communications director, I believe that's the term, but anyways, and he's posting on there weekly, and mostly it's about whatever. Some of it's been more recently about all the construction, keeping on top of it. And so I do believe there's a great amount of transparency. You just have to pay a little bit of attention. It ain't going to just sneak up and give you in a package on Wednesday. I mean, you have to work at it a little bit too, so it's there if you pay attention.
How about you in the role as mayor? How would you have transparency in your position?
Somewhat, I will admit, I'll be on a little bit of a learning curve. I don't think I'm too good to, I don't think I know everything, and I think I still got a little learning to do, and I think there's enough positive people around to give me a little help and tell me the difference, and that's what I believe.
Great, okay.
We have a relatively new feature called OpenGov, and it's been under discussion and purchase and installation now for maybe a year, because it takes a while to hook it up to everything. But a citizen can go to the OpenGov portal, and you can find out how many nails did the city buy last year. I mean, it's just amazing the depth that this goes into. I can't think of a category or an area that isn't completely laid out for whomever wants to see it, which is wonderful. I don't know how many people are using it.
But it's there.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's there. And on the city council agenda, if the things that are highlighted, if you click on that, all of a sudden, boom, all the background documents pop up. So you can see what we're seeing in the decision-making process. That's very helpful, and I think a lot of people don't know if they click on it, they'll get 12 more pages of information. I wish people were a little more attuned to it. The vast majority of public hearings we have, no one ever attends, which is their choice.
They are recorded, though.
Right. And there's 3 announcements before the public hearing, and that you do what you can do. But OpenGov is really a wonderful tool. It's exhaustive. I'm not sure how much we pay for it. I really don't recall, but it's worth every penny. And the more people that use it, the happier we are.
Yeah. Good. So last night, the college hosted an event called the China Town Hall meeting. And it happened across the nation. There were about 80 cities that were hosts. And we also had a local speaker come in, actually from Denver, so it wasn't very local, but local in the US, I guess. And he was able to remind us how special the Muscatine's relationship has been with China, going back to 1985 when then Vice President Xi Jinping visited with a delegation, and things kind of moved on from there. So my question to you both is, what would you like to see Muscatine's relationship with China be, culturally or in the business world? How do you see the next 5 to 10 years?
We have a magnificent opportunity now with Governor Branstad as the ambassador, U.S. ambassador to China, to help sell goods from Eastern Iowa, open doors, further economic development between the two. And that's marvelous. And some people here in Muscatine have, due to the Old Friends tour of, what was it, 5 years ago or so, they really have special links with people in China. I was told by a knowledgeable person who used to run Briggs and Stratton in China that we have had more delegations from China come to Muscatine than go to Chicago. They said Chicago would kill to have those delegations, to get those links going on. And we just have to be sure to take care of, to take advantage of them. And it's communicate and graduate. That's what it's all about. Yes, I know most of the merchandise is coming from them to us, but not all. And we've got opportunities to sell there. Musco is doing a marvelous job, and some other U.S. companies also selling goods in China. So it's a great opportunity. And we have a couple of residents here who can open doors in China who are Chinese, and that's very helpful. I know there's concern in some quarters about Chinese are buying up Muscatine, which is just nonsense. But we're lucky to have these connections, very, very lucky.
Yeah. Charlie, would you like to comment on that?
Well, that comes into the commuting. I've also heard that we've had the people, Chinese people from Chicago, commuting to Muscatine to go meet them, so we didn't have to go there. So we're getting more people coming in. Also, I have a son that works at one of the places here, and they went to China about having stuff made over there for use in China, not exporting it to this country. And anyways, after a few attempts going over there and a couple trips and being there, they couldn't quite handle it. So, and then a lot of stuff, people talk about the cheap Chinese stuff. Well, a lot of that cheap Chinese stuff comes from fault here in this country because it's somebody cheap spec'ing it for them, and they build it to the spec. So it's, they're getting the blame or credit for it when it's not altogether their fault. It's just that we got somebody here that's cheap about it, and they want to see how that ends up cheap coming out poorly made.
There's another international connection that's been strong for decades in Muscatine. When I was in Washington for a while, I'd meet people, where are you from? Muscatine, Iowa. Oh, they say, oh, I know about that. I think, wonderful, how? And I met many people, staffers, who said, oh, I was on a Stanley Foundation trip to the UN. They've sent hundreds and hundreds of congressional staffers over the years to the UN to learn more about it. And they all know about Muscatine and the Stanley Foundation because of that, which was a wonderful surprise.
Yeah, there's a lot of unique assets.
Yes, very unique.
That we have, yes. So there are many people, seems like, running this year to represent Muscatine, and many of them have been interviewed on this very show over the last few weeks. We don't have much longer to go until November 7th, so I want to be sure to ask the voters to cast your vote, learn about all of the candidates. Michael, again, you're in the 2nd Ward.
That's correct.
Who else, I guess, is running for that position?
The other individual is a gentleman named Malcolm. And in the 4th Ward, which is an open seat due to the incumbent's health, there are 4 candidates, which is highly unusual. And there are 3 candidates for the seat at large. Mr. Malcolm is a Chicago guy, very friendly. I've met him several times. And so we'll see. See, we're both working hard.
Good. So what would you like to leave the viewers with tonight?
I don't want to toot my horn too much.
This is the time to toot your horn.
This is the time. Or I could give you a few notes. Could you do it for me, please? I think, I know that people who want to support me can bank on my integrity and honesty. And all the people on the council are there just to try to make Muscatine better. And that's one of the nice parts about Muscatine. All the leadership, and the leadership are people who volunteer to say, hey, I'll help. And a lot of them in town, thank God. We're always trying to make Muscatine a better place, and that's a wonderful environment. You can't create that overnight. Sometimes I'll communicate a little too frankly, and I'm trying to get better at that. But you'll always know what I'm thinking, and it's always going to have to do. It will always have to do with making Muscatine a better place. It's that simple.
So Charlie's strength is communication. Remember him saying that.
Yes,
so
yes.
you need to have some mentorship.
And he can teach me a few things. He's been teaching me things since I was a teenager.
All right, Charlie, what would you like to leave the voters with tonight? What comments do you have?
Well, for one reason or other, I've been a life resident of the county and in Muscatine for only 61 years, and we don't move a lot. I've worked on a number of different things. We got a lot of great things going. A lot of great things is happening in Muscatine, and I do feel we're going to have a lot of more great things happening. So everything's going along, and some of them say, well, pretty soon we'll get the hotel up, and that's not just the end of that project. That's the beginning of the next chapter. So I think it's going on, and it's a great place to live. It's got all my grandkids are here, and except when they're away at school. But they're going on, and so they all amount to something, and just a great place to be.
I have something that I'd like to add, if I may.
Please, please.
One of my constituents is father of a large family, and he said his greatest accomplishment has been to produce 7 taxpayers. So, which is Mike Miller. I want to talk just for a second about the economic history of Muscatine. And it started with the lumber business. And the timber was cut down and it moved north over time. And that saw a big boom, and then it's leveled off and started to decline. And then we discovered clamshells in the river, and the button industry zoomed and kept going for a long time and brought prosperity to Muscatine, and then that waned. Then we were the luckiest town in America. 3 brilliant men happened to stumble onto Muscatine. They could have gone anywhere. Roy Carver came because there was an old abandoned sauerkraut factory. He could build pumps in it, and the rest of it is history. Gage Kent came to town and linked up with the Stein family, and Kent Corporation is the result. Max Stanley was a phenomenal guy. When he joined the engineering firm in Muscatine, it doubled in size from 1 to 2. And things have grown a bit since then. So we've been graced with the results from those 3 men and the teams they built. And those industries are now mature in the best sense of the word. And I've been wondering what's going to be the next thing. We can't depend on luck. And I feel the next thing is on the horizon. I can see it and almost touch it. And that is the proposed container port. Again, it happens that the river's here and the railroad spurs here and I always want to say bypass, but yeah, the bypass, they all come together in one point right next to the river. A lot of towns would like to do this, but they don't have a place. CP, Canadian Pacific, has promised that they'll be using unit trains from Vancouver and Montreal, a unit train being the whole train's going to one place, full of containers that they want to ship south. This is going to grow into a major logistical center, bringing good paying jobs of a high variety, and that's going to be the next wave of prosperity for Muscatine, I think. And I know I'm going to do everything I can to help promote it, and I think everyone else will too. It's a wonderful idea, and there's no reason it can't work. We'll just put our shoulders to the wheel and make it happen. So thank you.
Well, besides the big deal coming in, the big employers and that, there's one other thing that needs in the whole picture, and that's a lot of the little people.
Oh, that's
the people there, they've got a small business. There's only 1 or 2 of them. They're working. They're not 40 hours. They're lucky if they get it done in 70 and putting in the time. And all those people count too.
Absolutely, and they support and feed into our suppliers for the industries, and it just, the multiplier effect is amazing.
And a lot of those people do it because it's something they love, because when they get done, their W-2 at the end of the year is less than somebody that went and punched the time clock.
Yes, I know. Been there, done that, Charlie. Thank you.
I know something about that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we were in the same session, but I heard someone talk about the fact that Muscatine had several opportunities to really die as a town. When the lumber industry, was over, when the clamshell, the pearl buttons were over there were several opportunities where we could have just shriveled up.
Mm-hmm. Could have been like Fort Madison without the penitentiary.
And we didn't.
Yeah,
we
we
came
didn't.
back in a stronger version of Muscatine
That's right.
each time. Yeah, so this will be exciting to see
Really will.
that impact. Yeah.
Really will.
That's one of the ones having the privilege of riding a bike across the country. You're at a different pace than you are at 70 mile an hour down the interstate. Was out west, it was at one town, and anyways, it was just a little bit of a bypass. It was a small town. I think there was 11 people left there, and the bypass went there, and everybody forgot to go to town. And there was a lady, we talked to her, she was a postmistress, and she had a little store there, and I think the Coke bottle was over 2 years old since she'd sold the last one. It was so things there. And she was really blaming her husband. She'd been a war bride, and he brought her over from Japan, and he went up and died, and she couldn't go anywhere else. And so
Stuck, huh?
she'd probably sell 2 loaves of bread. That'd been a big day if she did it in one day. So I mean, it's hard to see and see other things going. And like I say, it's a real adventure, and it's a kaleidoscope of the country.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. This is Muscatine Viewpoint. Tonight we had an opportunity to get to know Charlie Harper. He's running for Muscatine mayor, and Michael Rehwaldt, who is running again for representing the 2nd Ward of Muscatine. So thank you very much to both of you for sharing your experiences, your thoughts, your dreams for Muscatine. Please go out and vote November 7th. We have one more show before then next week, which will be the Great Debate. We won't be interviewing candidates. We'll be talking about some of the issues that we want to see addressed in Muscatine. So thanks for tuning in, and good night.
From the back room, calling my name and I follow just to find you. I trace the faith to a broken down television and put on the weather. And I've trained myself to give up on the past, 'cause I've frozen time between hearses and caskets, lost control